with Hurricane Dorian swirling around the Atlantic, having smashed the Bahamas and just finishing up, it made me think how Moonface is so much like a hurricane. We're going to talk today about how Moonface is like a hurricane, and then we'll talk about what we can do about it. So 8 years ago, I was in Hurricane Irene, and 28 years ago, I was in Hurricane Bob in Boston. And there were things that we did and experiences that we shared as a sufferer in a hurricane that are similar to how it feels when you are using Moonface Maker. So this picture shows a hurricane from outer space. You can see that hole in the middle. That's the eye of the storm. It's an unbelievably peaceful place surrounded by incredible chaos and confusion and destruction. And Moonface Maker is like that. It can cause so much destruction. It can make you feel crazy. It can make you feel so hungry, you eat until your stomach hurts and you still don't feel full. It can make your bones lose, you get bone loss. And there's just this swirl of chaos when you're using Moonface Maker. But there's a beautiful, peaceful place in the middle, that eye of the storm, where whatever reason you started using Moonface Maker is being treated. For me, my ITP, I stopped bleeding to death. And that was a miracle. And it made it worth it because that peace was so much better. So our goal today is to figure out how to have more of the eye of the storm. You can see in this picture where the hurricane is rolling in. The birds are flying away from the ocean. And if you stood here and you just stayed right here during the hurricane, you would get blown away and you'd probably drown. Because those waves would crash onto the shore with the hurricane force winds blowing them, and it would just wash you away. So nobody does that, right? You don't stand on the beach during a hurricane. You take measures. You can, for example, go to higher ground. So higher ground would be inland. So not right on the coast, but go several miles away from the coast. It could be by going up on the cliffs or the hills next to the coast. It could be going to the top room of your house. Whatever it is, you are taking care of yourself to make sure that the damage is as little as possible to you. And so when we're talking about Moonface, that means using the lowest dose possible, the lowest dose for the shortest period of time. Often it's hard to find the lowest dose that will work for you, but it's worth it to reach that place of peace and not have so much destruction. Next, you can see this house after a hurricane. My favorite part of this house is the little X on the front door, showing that they taped that storm door, and that it's called a storm door is kind of funny. That little X kept the window of the storm door from cracking and being blown in from those hurricane winds. And that was a really important preventive measure that they took. When they found out the hurricane was coming their way, I'll bet they went to the grocery store and bought tape and bought so they could tape up all their windows, and they bought water, and they bought food that wouldn't go bad if the electricity went out, and they filled up their gas tank so that whenever the roads opened, they would be able to get away if they needed to. And they got batteries and flashlights for that time when the power goes out. They took all of these really important steps in a checklist that they probably had planned in advance. They probably have saved up food and blankets so that when this bad thing happens, they're ready for it. But that wasn't enough. Sometimes a hurricane, like Hurricane Dorian right now, one of the newspaper reporters flying over talked about how indiscriminate Hurricane Dorian was to the houses in the Bahamas. You could see a neighborhood and one house would be left standing and several others would be completely decimated. It seemed random and unpredictable. And that's exactly how it is when you're on Moon Facemaker. You might have taken it in the past and had no problem. You might have a relative who'd used it and they'd had no problem. And then suddenly something terrible can happen. My friend just told me today that Moon Facemaker caused her to have a pulmonary embolism. That's terrible. And I'm glad she survived and it didn't kill her, because that could be fatal. So the important part, though, is that we change what we can change. This person who owned this house couldn't change the fact that the direction of the wind would blow the trees over onto their house. What they could change was whether they taped their windows or not. And they did. They taped that front door. So while it may seem like we're succumbing to the crazy chaos, we can do certain things to fight back. And the reason we want to do those things is so that we can have the most peaceful and pleasant experience possible while we are on Moon Facemaker. And have the eye of the storm, that peaceful place, be as wide as possible to minimize the extent of the damage by staying out of the chaotic zones. So what can you do? What are some things you can do? Well, one of the number one things that anyone on Moon Facemaker should do is be eating a healthful diet, rich in nutrients, and avoiding refined foods. But what else can you do? I created a wellness checklist for you that you can use to figure out what options you have to fight back, to find out what you can do to prevent damage. We can't prevent everything. We can't prevent the trees crashing on our house, but we can prevent the windows from breaking in. So click the link below and it will take you to a page that will give you a full checklist. Just like somebody would have used a checklist during a hurricane, this checklist will help you to be empowered to change the things that are in your realm to change. Signing off until next time at Moon Face Place.